Hey VC, it's Dave here. Today I'm entering Steve Carlson's contest, which is called Thank You VC. Steve, back last year sometime, he lives up in Midland, Michigan, and they had a lake or a dam on that lake that broke, and it flooded all of his records. True horror thing for something, you know, for a vinyl collector, and it pretty much wiped out his collection. The VC came together and sent him some albums back in that time, but and he still collected them, you know, like he always did way back before all that. But you know, it's a really horrible thing, you know, for somebody that collects something and to lose something like that. But he's doing a lot better these days and happy as ever, and I always look forward to Steve's show on Sunday mornings and to see all the stuff that he has gotten throughout the weeks, you know, whenever he goes record buying or whatever. So anyway, he's having this contest. He's giving away some really good prizes, and I'll leave the link to his contest below. One of the things that he's giving away some t-shirts and some hats, but he's also giving away some cash prizes and a box set of Miles Davis Kind of Blue album. But anyway, he wants this, and by the way, if you aren't familiar with his channel, check it out. Like I said, I'll leave a link. But he wanted us to show 4 or more albums that were either gifted to you from other friends or whatever, or, and I just remember something I was going to pull, but I didn't pull them. But anyway, I've got enough albums here. But show 4 or more albums that were either gifted to you or somebody that you know influenced you to buy them. And one of my biggest influences is my brother, and also one of my best friends would be my brother. He passed away back in 2012, and it was a pretty big loss. But we were always pretty close, you know, even as kids growing up. And you know, I was into records. He was into records. I think I got the first record player when I was a kid back in '65. And we shared a room together, and so we kind of grew up with music, both of us. And you know, if I bought music, he'd buy some music, you know. And then way back whenever cassettes came along, you know, I'd buy some albums and loan them to him, and then he would buy some and loan them to me. And it was always an interesting way to you know, find new bands and stuff like that. But even back before that, you know, he would buy records and I would buy records, and you know, whenever we were living together, you know, under the same roof at my parents' house, you know, we just, you know, we often shared the same room. You know, I'd listen to his and he'd listen to mine. This is one of the earlier things that he bought way back when. This had been back in, I don't know, 65, 66, something like that, The Best of Loving Spoonful. And I was familiar with a few of their songs on the radio way back when, but you know, this is the first album that I'd heard by them, and I don't know, his name is Danny. I don't know where he heard of this band, or it was just a shot in the dark to him. But yeah, a real interesting album. It's got all the hits on it from way back in the day. Summer in the City was, I think, their last hit on the radio. But yeah, real good album. He was also the first one to buy a Rolling Stones album, and this was the first one that he bought. And I'd had some 45s by the Rolling Stones, but had never bought an album by them. And so this was the first one that he ever bought that I listened to, and of course I liked it right away. It's got Painted Black on it, and Stupid Girl, and a real long song on it for back in the day. It was 11 minutes and 35 seconds, called Going Home. It's just a real interesting Rolling Stones album, and still like listening to it today. Of course, back in the 70s, there was a record store back where we were living in Odessa. It was called Endless Horizons, which I think they just celebrated close to their 50th year that they've been open, something like that, 48th year, 47th year, something like that. I just saw a little blurb here the other day from that area, from one of the news channels, and if it's still up, I'll even post that below to show what the record store looked like. It's really just a really small store by comparison to a lot of other places. Of course, Odessa's not really a huge town either. It's a mid-sized town, about 100,000 plus. But Endless Horizons was one of the main stores we'd go to, and the guys running it, we were always playing something real interesting. And you know, whenever I'd go record shopping, a lot of that influenced me on what I bought, and the same for him. And he'd go buy something, and I'd listen to it. Same thing. I'd buy something, and he would get interested in it or want to pick it up. But this is Dire Straits' first album. I remember him buying this about the time it was released. And again, another really good album. I bought a copy of it after even buying his and taping it. But you know, their first 3 or 4 albums are all real interesting. Love this cover too. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if he had heard this somewhere or he heard this going in to the record store, but this might have been something he heard on the radio too. We both used to listen to Hearts of Space, and this might have been featured on it because it's one of Steve Hillage's more ambient records. But one song on one side and one song on another. But it's still one of my favorite Steve Hillage albums. He used to be the guitar player for Gong way back in the day. And then I remember he picked up one of the albums I was going to pull was R.E.M's first album, Murmur. I believe that was their first album, and he also picked up this one, which is very much less active. It's like R.E.M. in some ways, but more not as quite jangly pop. It's more the guitar lines are kind of more interwoven, maybe a little bit more layered or something like that, but it's still pop music. Mitch Easter used to be the figurehead of this band here, and yeah, one of the few pop albums that came out back then in the, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, something like that. But it's still an interesting album. I'll listen to it even today. That record store, the guy that was running it actually was run by 3 guys, and 2 of the guys sold out their share to the one guy whose name was Tom. And then right before I moved down here, Tom had passed, and so his son now is running that store. And apparently it's still doing good even today. But this is a box set that my brother bought way back when. This is one of the first albums that really I listened to quite a bit, and I remember being more or less really bowled over by it, and was sort of a you know, a gateway or whatever into classical music for me, because I really this got me into classical music big time. It's by this Academy of Ancient Music by Christopher Hogwood, and yeah, a really nice recording it is. Now, back when I was living in Big Springs, there used to be a guy that lived next door to us, and his name was Russ Crocker, and kind of lost contact with him when I moved, but I mean, like, they moved actually before we did. And I remember Rush having one of the things that I forgot to pull was he had some Mamas and Papas albums that I really liked, but he also had this album here, and I eventually picked it up, The Doors' Strange Days. And this is the first one that I heard by them, and this is the one that I kind of prefer over all their albums. But you know, I got the rest of their discography too. But yeah, I always have a fondness for this album here. A lot of great songs on here. And then when I was living in Austin, I got a job down there right after I got out of school. There was a drummer that lived above me, and he wasn't active at the time. He'd played before me moving down there, but he knew a lot of the Austin musicians that were playing there. And he was really into the Allman Brothers, and of course I was already familiar with the Allman Brothers. But around that time that I was down there, Duane Allman had died. Excuse me. And this album here came out, and he had bought this album, and I listened to it. I'd seen it in the record stores, but I was kind of like, oh, it's going to be one of those albums that, you know, for some reason I'm not going to be too interested in. But he played it, and it's real blues oriented, but just like the Allman Brothers were. But yeah, it's a really well made album. And he does the Jackson Browne song on here called These Days, which is really appropriate for this album. Sort of melancholy song in a lot of ways, but very apropos, you know, after his brother died. And then it's also got Midnight Rider on here that he also, that was back on the radio back in the day. But yeah, real interesting album. Then down in Austin, I had a roommate when I was going to school up in Lubbock. His name was Larry, and he was a real big music fan, and we would, you know, listen to music all the time and all that type of thing. But he moved down to Austin, and was still buying music and everything. We'd go down there to see him occasionally, whenever we get a vacation. And Larry would, you know, play us some new music that he'd been listening to at the time. And this was one of them. He got into this Wyndham Hill Records pretty heavily. This is Will Ackerman's Childhood in Memory. And it's just guitar, solo music. I guess it falls under the New Age, and back in the day I think they used to put these under the New Age category. But I think it goes beyond that. You know, it's just real sort of interesting guitar music. And this album cover really kind of depicts a lot of what it's like, because it's real evocative. I guess it evokes a lot of emotion in the way that he plays it. And I believe this is the first album I picked up. You know, it's got still got the Waterloo sticker on it. But yeah, a real nice acoustic guitar album if you're into that type of thing. And then Larry was into all sorts of music, and he gave me this album. I have one of Terry Riley's other albums that he gave me. This is Terry Riley in C. I guess he's basically known to be a classical musician, or avant-garde classical musician, something like that. But he was sort of a precursor to Steve Reich, John Adams, and all that type of thing. But this is one of his more famous albums. Steve Riley in C. And there are a couple other albums I was going to pull that Larry had influenced me to buy. The first one was another one that he had was Phaedra by Tangerine Dream. It was the first time I ever heard any synthesizer music like that. Of course, I was totally bowled over by it and really liked it. And another one that he liked a lot back then, well, there were many albums that he introduced me to. But another one that he liked was Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks vocal group, sort of. And I believe one of the ladies in that band was Mary Ann Price. I always remember him talking about her. I could be wrong, but I believe she was from Austin at that time. She's probably moved on by now. And Larry was big into classical music too, and he also had he liked. He was kind of unusual in his taste, but I mean, I liked him for that reason. Of course, back in the day, he was into rock music and everything, but he started getting more into jazz, and people like Duke Ellington and all the older jazz musicians, and he was into some of the ECM stuff too. So, you know, I'm sure he's still listening to music today. He'll send me an email and say, hey, have you heard this? And, you know, I'll read his email and you know, check it out. But anyway, Steve has showed a few albums, and just wanted to come on here and, you know, show some albums that I have been influenced to pick up over the years. So, I hope a lot of people enter your contest, and still enjoy your Sunday morning show. And just saw one here the other day where he picked up a box set of heavy metal albums. I forget the label that those are on, but sort of interesting. So he's always picking up something new. He likes a lot of African music. Larry, the guy that gave me this Terry Riley album, and he gave me another one too, I forgot to pull it, but he was also somebody that got me kind of into foreign music or ethnic music, world music, however you want to put that. But there was a famous album, compilation album of Cuban musicians, and it was produced by David Byrne, and now I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a real good album. I have that on CD. So anyway, Steve, still enjoy your show, and I think I'll go, and hope everybody's having a good day. I'll talk to you later.